I thought it would be fun today to do a bit of a case study and see when is the best time to sell sports cards. What's going on, guys? Matt here, back again with another video. We're currently just over a month into the NBA season. We're starting to learn which teams and players are justifying their preseason hype. But I was recently thinking, with all the hype that we do see before the NBA season on certain players to break out or perform well, when is actually the best time to sell their sports cards to maximize profit? Now, it's impossible to sell at the perfect time every single time, but hopefully through my research today, we can come up with a few guidelines that may help us in the future. And this is more aimed in the short term for sports card investors and flippers. Leading up to the NBA season, we all see these videos or articles of people saying who will potentially break out in the upcoming season, and that alone can help drive prices. So let's run through 4 players who are predicted to break out and run through their prices during this whole period and see what circumstances have allowed their price to come up or down. First up, the player who is currently favourite to win the Most Improved Player award this season in Miles Bridges from the Charlotte Hornets. Bridges in his 4th season has jumped up from a 13 point per game average to just under 22 points per game, and he's also grabbing over 7 rebounds a game, and he's slated to become a first-time All-Star. Now, we could have predicted Bridges' breakout season just by looking at his finish to the season, where he averaged 21 points and 7 rebounds in his last 16 games at crazy efficiency. This breakout span of games doesn't always translate into the following seasons, but it was a great indicator of what Miles Bridges was capable of. Let's look at Miles Bridges' cards, and for these examples, I'm going to use each respective player's silver prisms just because people are so down on base that we probably can't get a reliable measure using it. Looking at his silver PSA 9 and PSA 10 cards over the past year, we see this run up in his cards from the 4th of April until the 28th of April, and that directly correlates to the span of games where Bridges goes on a scoring run. We then see his cards drop as the Hornets don't make it into the playoffs, and even with off-season and pre-season hype, Bridges' silver prism cards don't really move until you see this massive spike starting on the 22nd of October, which does plateau on the 4th of November at $595 US for the PSA 10 and $144 for the PSA 9. This again goes in line with his start to the season, where up to the 4th of November, Bridges was averaging 24 points a game before coming down slightly to 21 points per game. So Bridges' peak of his card prices was a couple of weeks into the season, where he had exceeded expectations and held strong before they started declining. Let's look at another player in Kevin Porter Jr. from the Houston Rockets. So I included KPJ in my 2020 to 21 investment list video, but I also gave a very fair warning about his potential turnover issues, being a first-time point guard and potential inefficiency. Now, what have KPJ's 2 biggest downfalls been this season? His turnovers, where he averages just over 4 a game, and his shot selection, where he's shooting 36% from the field, which is very average. There was a lot of hype placed on KPJ in the offseason, with his card prices even nearing Ja Morant's at one point. At the end of last season, you could find KPJ's Silver Prism PSA 10 for around the $300 mark, and it was coming off a very strong finish to the season, which did include a 50-point game against one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA in Drew Holiday. We can see this card slowly increases throughout the offseason, and we can attribute that to the drafting of Jalen Green, who people thought would complement KPJ's game really well. By the 5th of October, KPJ had played his first preseason game and played well, scoring 25 points and dishing out 5 assists, and at this point, the hype had already pushed his Silver Prism PSA 10 up to $400. We see this increased plateau at $470 on the 28th of October, which is 5 games into the NBA season, where KPJ is averaging 12 points and 5 assists on 5 turnovers, which is a massive contrast to his first preseason game. Now, this is the craziest and scariest part here, and a massive lesson to take away if you do invest in sports cards, because within a week, his price went down more than half to $187, and although it did have a few sales over $200, it seems like it will stay at just under $200 US. The lesson here is how quickly and drastically a player's cards can drop based off performance, especially if they don't meet people's expectations. The Rockets are currently 1 win and 16 losses, and KPJ is out injured for the time being, so it highlights the amount of money that can be lost if you decide to gamble on performance. As a Houston fan, I think I've seen enough to say that KPJ won't be that pairing for the future with Jalen Green to build around, unfortunately, so I've sold off, and I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. Moving on to the next player, who is from the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that's Darius Garland. Now, Garland is another one who received a fair bit of hype, not just from the fans, but even the GOAT shooter in Steph Curry. The Cavs even being rumored to prefer holding on to Darius Garland than Colin Sexton was another key indicator in their belief in Garland. So he was another player you could have predicted to have a breakout season with his strong finish, and in the month of April last season, he averaged 20 points and 7 assists. In the middle of May, once the Cavaliers had already begun their off-season, Garland's Silver Prism PSA 10 was trading at $200 US. We see that price has a slight increase throughout the off-season, having a high sale of $345, but this seems like an outlier sale, so we'll say that the Garland Silver peaks at just under $300. Again, we see his cards fall, and when we match up the dates of when the card starts to fall, it is a couple of days before the season opening game. Garland largely disappointed at the start of the season, averaging 13 points and 8 assists, and even sustaining an ankle injury which kept him out for 2 games. His price even dropped to the off-season price as a direct result of that, but that has slowly made its way up, now just hitting over $250. The reason for this upward spike is thanks to the season-ending injury of Colin Sexton and the expectation for Darius Garland to step up in his role and produce stats. Let's move on to our last example in Daniel Gafford. Now, Gafford was another who was touted by many, including myself, to build on his strong finish last season. Unfortunately, we've seen almost the opposite, and it's not really Gafford's fault, as the Wizards are only playing him 20 minutes a game and are prioritising the playing time of Montrezl Harrell. Not like this is a bad thing for the Wizards though, as they're shocking the rest of the NBA and currently one of the sleeper teams going around with 11 wins and 6 losses. His stats have mirrored last season, and he averages just under 9 points a game with 5 rebounds and 1.6 blocks a game. Gafford's silver PSA 10 seemed to fluctuate throughout the offseason, but in July and August it seems to stabilise around the $50 to $60 range. We do see a small spike during the preseason where it starts to hit the $80 range, as Gafford has a string of solid games as a starting centre. But we see his silver PSA 10 go from $55 at the start of the season to $26 currently, as people's expectations are not met with his play. Now that we've gone through 4 of these examples, what are the key lessons that we can take from these 4 players that we can potentially use in the future? Mainly, it's better to sell off prospective breakout players before the start of the season, because it's more than likely that their play will not meet investors' expectations. We've seen this with players who haven't matched people's predictions in Daniel Gafford and Kevin Porter Jr., but even Darius Garland investors are in a similar boat, and if anything can count themselves lucky that Colin Sexton got an injury, which has allowed Garland to have a boost in his role. It's actually a little bit unfair on Garland because he hasn't even been playing terribly, but more so the expectations were set too high in terms of his card prices. The one player from my research who has sustained his preseason hype and even exceeded it is Miles Bridges, and he's playing at an all-star level and on track to win the most improved player award. Bridges' example shows that unless you think they'll be a genuine all-star or have a drastic improvement, most players won't live up to their preseason hype. Hanging on to players during the season is a massive gamble as always, especially if you're a short-term sports card investor or flipper, but obviously this doesn't really matter as much if you're wanting to hold players medium to long term. Of course, it's a long NBA season and any of these players can go the opposite way and make me look stupid, but do let me know in the comments if you do agree. That is it for today's video. A bit of research was put into this, so do smash the thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button as always, and I will see you all in future videos. Take care.